The bridge of the UNS Retribution hummed with quiet activity as Admiral Jake Morrison studied the star charts on his command screen. His fleet of 12 warships had been patrolling the outer edge of human space for 3 months now. The other, alien races called them the Death Fleet, and Morrison knew why. Every ship in his command was built for one purpose: to kill enemies of humanity as efficiently as possible. Morrison was a tall man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He had spent 30 years fighting wars across the galaxy. His uniform was dark blue with silver stars on his shoulders. The crew respected him because he always brought them home alive, even from the worst battles. Communications officer Lisa Barnes sat at her station near the front of the bridge. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and quick fingers that danced across her control panels. She had been monitoring radio signals from deep space when something unusual caught her attention. "Admiral, I'm picking up a weak signal from Sector 7, Lisa said, turning in her chair to face Morrison. "It's not human, sir. The pattern is completely different from anything in our database." Morrison walked over to her station, his heavy boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. The bridge was dimly lit with blue lights, giving everything a cold appearance that matched the deadly nature of their mission. "Can you decode it?" Morrison asked, leaning over Lisa's shoulder to look at the strange waveforms on her screen. "Working on it now, sir," Lisa replied, her fingers moving quickly across the translation software controls. "The computer is trying to match it against known alien languages." Captain Ben Walsh appeared at Morrison's side. He was Morrison's tactical advisor, a stocky man with a beard and sharp green eyes. Walsh had fought in more battles than most people could count, and his advice had saved the fleet many times. "Could be a trap," Walsh said quietly, crossing his arms. "Pirates sometimes use fake distress signals to lure ships into ambushes." Morrison nodded but kept watching Lisa work. The translation software was making progress, slowly converting the alien sounds into words that humans could understand. As the message became clearer, Morrison felt his expression change. "Admiral," Lisa said, her voice becoming serious, "you need to hear this." She played the translated message through the bridge speakers. The voice that came out was clearly not human. It had a musical quality that rose and fell like singing. But the words were desperate and filled with fear. "To any species capable of receiving this transmission, this is Prime Minister Thylan Voss of the Zilani Confederation. Our civilization is dying. The Korthak Dominion has destroyed our homeworld and 6 of our colonies. 3 million of my people are trapped on Sanctuary Haven, our last remaining world. The Korthak fleet surrounds us. They give no mercy. They take no prisoners. If there is anyone out there who can help us, please respond. We do not have much time left." The bridge fell silent. Morrison had heard many distress calls over the years, but something about this one was different. The alien's voice carried a sadness that reminded him of humanity's own dark times, when they had faced extinction from enemies that seemed impossible to defeat. "How far away are they?" Morrison asked. Lisa checked her instruments. 12 days at maximum speed, sir. The signal is coming from the sanctuary system, just outside the neutral zone." Walsh frowned and shook his head. "Admiral, that's not our problem. These Zilani aren't human. We have no treaty obligations to help them. And we don't know anything about this Korthak Dominion. They might be more powerful than us." Morrison understood Walsh's concerns. The Terran Expeditionary Force was strong, but they weren't invincible. Taking on an unknown enemy to save an alien species could result in the destruction of the entire fleet. But something about the Zilani's desperate plea reminded Morrison of his own species' history. "Lisa, can you get more information about these Zilani?" Morrison asked. Lisa worked at her console for several minutes analyzing the signal's data streams. "The transmission includes some biological information, sir. Let me send it to Dr. Foster in the medical bay." Dr. Amy Foster was the fleet's xenobiologist and expert in alien life forms. If anyone could tell them what kind of species they were dealing with, it would be her. Morrison waited patiently while Lisa transferred the data. 10 minutes later, Dr. Foster's voice came through the bridge communication system. She sounded surprised and a little sad. Admiral, these Zilani are nothing like us, Dr. Foster said. According to their biological data, they have no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no poison. They're completely peaceful. Their entire civilization appears to be built around trade and cooperation. They literally have no concept of warfare. Morrison closed his eyes and thought about what Dr. Foster had just told him. The Zilani were the opposite of humans in every way. While humanity had evolved as predators on a dangerous world, constantly fighting for survival, the Zilani had apparently evolved in peace. They were prey animals facing a predator they had no hope of defeating alone. What about this Korthak, Dominion? Morrison asked. Unknown, sir, Dr. Foster replied. But if they're systematically destroying entire civilizations, they're probably much more like us, warriors, predators. Walsh moved closer to Morrison and spoke quietly. Admiral, even if we wanted to help these Zilani, we're talking about fighting an enemy that has already destroyed 7 worlds. That takes serious military power. Morrison walked to the front of the bridge and stared out at the stars through the main viewing window. His fleet was powerful, but Walsh was right about the risks. The smart tactical decision would be to ignore the distress call and continue their patrol. But Morrison had not become an admiral by making only safe decisions. Chief Carter, Morrison called to his chief engineer through the communication system. Yes, sir, came the reply from the engine room. I want all weapons systems checked and ready for combat operations. Full diagnostics on every ship in the fleet. Aye, sir, how long do we have? Morrison looked back at Lisa, who was still monitoring the Zilani transmission. The signal was getting weaker, which meant their situation was getting worse. We leave. For the sanctuary system in 2 hours, Morrison announced to the bridge crew. All ships maximum speed. Walsh stared at Morrison in surprise. Sir, are you sure about this? Morrison turned to face his tactical advisor. His blue eyes were hard and determined, the look of a man who had made his decision and would not change his mind. Captain Walsh, humanity didn't become the dominant species in our part of the galaxy by abandoning others to extinction. The Zilani asked for help. We're going to give it to them. Walsh nodded slowly. He had served under Morrison long enough to recognize that tone of voice. The Admiral had made his choice, and now it was time to prepare for war. Aye, sir, Walsh said. I'll brief the other ship commanders on our new mission. As the bridge crew began preparing for their journey to the sanctuary system, Morrison remained at the viewing window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 3 million aliens were waiting to die, surrounded by enemies they could not fight. In 12 days, they would discover what it meant to have humanity answer their call for help. Morrison smiled grimly. The galaxy was about to learn why other species called his fleet the Death Fleet. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the sanctuary system. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Retribution, watching the main screen as it showed what they had found. His jaw tightened as he saw the scene before them. Sanctuary Haven was a blue and green world, much like Earth, but it was surrounded by death. 47 alien warships floated in perfect formation around the planet. The ships were sleek and white, like knives made of light. They were beautiful in a cold, deadly way that made Morrison think of predators. Those must be the Korthak ships, Communications Officer Lisa Barnes said from her station. I'm reading massive energy signatures from all of them. Their weapons are definitely active. Morrison could see the damage the Korthak had already done to the planet. Parts of the surface glowed with fire from orbital bombardment. The Zilani cities that remained looked small and helpless compared to the fleet above them. Any sign that they've detected us? Morrison asked. Lieutenant Commander Sam Torres, the fleet's intelligence officer, checked his instruments. Torres was a quiet man with dark hair and careful eyes. He specialized in gathering information about enemies, and right now he was very busy. Not yet, sir, Torres replied. We're still at the edge of the system, and they seem focused on the planet, but they'll spot us soon enough. Captain Ben Walsh moved to Morrison's side. Admiral, we're outnumbered 4-1. Those Korthak ships are bigger than ours, and we don't know what kind of weapons they have. Morrison nodded but kept studying the enemy formation. The Korthak had arranged their ships in a perfect sphere around the planet, with no gaps for anyone to escape. It was the formation of a species that had done this many times before. Lisa, can you establish contact with the Zilani on the surface? Morrison asked. Working on it now, sir, Lisa replied, her fingers dancing over her controls. I'm using the same frequency as their distress signal. After a few minutes, Lisa looked up with success on her face. I have them, sir. Prime Minister Thailand Voss is waiting to speak with you. Put him on screen, Morrison ordered. The main viewing screen changed to show the interior of what looked like an underground bunker. The alien who appeared was unlike anything Morrison had ever seen. Thailand Voss was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. He wore simple robes and looked exhausted and afraid. When he saw Morrison, his eyes went wide with surprise. You are not Zilani, Thailand said in accented but clear English. What species are you? We are humans, Morrison replied. We received your distress call. I am Admiral Jake Morrison of the Terran Expeditionary Force. Thailand's expression changed to hope mixed with confusion. Humans? We have never heard of your species. But you actually came to help us? Morrison felt a strange feeling in his chest as he looked at the alien leader. Thailand reminded him of a frightened child, despite being clearly intelligent and adult. There was something pure about his hope that made Morrison want to protect him. We came to help, Morrison confirmed. Can you tell me about your situation? Thailand's large eyes filled with sadness. The Korthak appeared in our space 6 months ago. They demanded that we surrender completely and become their slaves. When we refused, they began destroying our worlds one by one. We tried to negotiate to find peace, but they showed no mercy. Another alien appeared beside Thailand on the screen. This one was female, with the same blue skin but shorter and wearing what looked like a military uniform. This is Zena Claire, our military coordinator, Thailand explained. Zena stepped forward and spoke with urgency. Admiral Morrison, our people are not warriors. We have never fought a war in our entire history. Our ships are for trading and exploration, not fighting. The Korthak destroyed our entire fleet in the first week. Morrison exchanged glances with Walsh. A species with no military experience facing professional killers was exactly what they had feared. What can you tell me about the Korthak? Morrison asked. Zena consulted a device in her hand. Their ships are powered by plasma energy. Their weapons are energy-based as well. They fire beams of superheated matter. Their shields can absorb tremendous amounts of energy before failing. They are also very fast and maneuverable. Torres was taking notes on everything Zena said. Intelligence about enemy capabilities was crucial for any battle plan. Their leader is War Admiral Krex Thane. Zena continued. He has destroyed 17 civilizations before us. The Korthak call him the Purifier, because he leaves no survivors. Morrison felt his anger growing as he listened. The Korthak sounded like the worst kind of predators, the kind that killed for pleasure rather than survival. How many of your people are left? Morrison asked. 3 million on this world, Thailand replied sadly. That is all that remains of our civilization. 20 billion Zilani lived across our world 6 months ago. The bridge of the retribution fell silent. Morrison felt the weight of those numbers. An entire civilization reduced to one small population on one world, surrounded by enemies who wanted to finish the job. Admiral, Torres said quietly, I'm reading movement from the Korthak fleet. They've detected us and are moving to intercept. Morrison looked back at the tactical display. The beautiful white ships were breaking their formation around the planet and heading directly toward the human fleet. They moved with deadly grace like a school of predatory fish. Thailand, Zena, Morrison said, turning back to the screen. We need to end this communication. The Korthak are coming for us, but I want you to know something. We did not come all this way to abandon you now. Thailand's eyes filled with tears. Admiral Morrison, your 12 ships cannot defeat 47 Korthak vessels. We are grateful that you tried, but you should escape while you can. Do not let our extinction become yours. Morrison smiled, and for the first time since arriving at Sanctuary Haven, it was not a grim expression. Thylan, you don't understand. Humans aren't like you or the Korthak. We don't fight wars the way other species do. What do you mean? Xena asked. The Korthak think they're predators, Morrison explained. But they've never met the apex predators of Earth. They're about to learn why the rest of the galaxy calls us Deathworlders. Morrison signaled to Lisa to cut the communication. The screen returned to showing the approaching Korthak fleet. Captain Walsh, Morrison said, his voice becoming cold and professional. Signal all ships, battle stations, weapons free. Sir, Torres said from his station. I'm receiving a transmission from the lead Korthak ship. Put it on screen, Morrison. Ordered. The viewing screen changed again, this time showing a Korthak warrior. The alien was tall and covered in dark scales with red eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. When he spoke, his voice was full of arrogance and cruelty. I am War Admiral Krex Thane of the Korthak Dominion, the alien said. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed. Your primitive ships are no match for Korthak technology. Morrison stepped forward so that Thane could see him clearly. I am Admiral Jake Morrison. I suggest you withdraw from this system immediately. Thane laughed, a harsh sound that made Morrison's crew uncomfortable. You dare to threaten me with 12 Fettle ships? I have conquered species far more advanced than yours. When I am finished with you, I will process your crew for biological material. Morrison's expression did not change, but everyone on the bridge could feel the temperature drop. War Admiral Thane, you have made a critical error. And what is that? Thane asked, still amused. You threatened humanity, Morrison replied simply. Morrison signaled to Lisa to cut the transmission. The screen returned to showing the tactical display, where the Korthak fleet was now only minutes away from weapons range. All ships, Morrison announced over the fleet communication system. This is Admiral Morrison. The enemy believes we are weak because our ships are made of metal instead of energy. They believe we are primitive because we use kinetic weapons instead of plasma. They are about to discover why those differences make us the most dangerous predators in this galaxy. Morrison paused, looking around his bridge at his crew. They were ready for battle, their faces showing the same cold determination that had made humanity feared across the stars. Today we show the galaxy what happens when someone threatens innocent people in front of humans. Today we remind the universe why they call us the Death Fleet. Admiral Morrison watched the Korthak fleet approach on his tactical display. The enemy ships moved in perfect formation, their white hulls gleaming like polished bone against the darkness of space. War Admiral Thane's flagship led the charge, followed by 46 other vessels arranged in a deadly arrow formation. Distance to enemy fleet? Morrison asked. 50,000 kilometers and closing fast. Lieutenant Commander Torres replied from his intelligence station. They're maintaining formation speed. Estimate contact in 4 minutes. Captain Walsh stood beside Morrison, studying the enemy approach. Their formation is perfect, Walsh observed. No gaps, no weak points. These aren't amateurs. Morrison nodded. The Korthak had clearly done this many times before. Their precision suggested centuries of experience in destroying civilizations. But Morrison had spent his entire career fighting enemies who thought they were unbeatable. Captain Rodriguez, Morrison called over the communication system to the destroyer UN's Vengeance. Yes, sir, came the reply from Captain Dan Rodriguez, a veteran fighter pilot who had earned his command through dozens of successful missions. You have the honor of firing the first shot, Morrison said. Target the lead cruiser in their second line. Full railgun charge. Aye, sir. Charging railgun now. Morrison turned to Communications Officer Lisa Barnes. Lisa, open a channel to all ships. I want everyone to hear this. Lisa nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. Morrison's voice would now reach every human in the fleet. This is Admiral Morrison. He began, his voice calm and steady. In 60 seconds we will engage an enemy that has destroyed 17 civilizations. They think we are primitive. They think our metal ships and kinetic weapons make us weak. They are about to learn why humanity survived when our own planet tried to kill us every single day. Morrison paused, watching the distance counter on his display continue to count down. Remember your training. Remember why we are here? These Korthak have killed 20 billion innocent people. Today we make them pay for every single life. The fleet-wide channel went silent. On the tactical display, the Korthak ships were now close enough that Morrison could see individual weapon ports along their hulls. Energy readings showed that their plasma cannons were charging for battle. 30 seconds to weapons range, Torres announced. Morrison felt the familiar calm that came before battle. His heart rate slowed, his breathing became steady, and his mind focused completely on the task ahead. Around him, his bridge crew prepared for combat with the same professional efficiency that had kept them alive through dozens of previous battles. "Sir," Torres said, "the Korthak are hailing us again." "Put Thane on screen," Morrison ordered. War Admiral Thane appeared on the main viewing screen, his red eyes glowing with confidence. Behind him, Morrison could see the sleek interior of a Korthak command ship, all smooth curves and pulsing energy conduits. "Last chance, human," Thane said with amusement. "Surrender now and I will make your deaths quick." Morrison looked directly into Thane's red eyes. "War Admiral, you have made two mistakes. First, you threatened innocent people. Second, you underestimated humanity. Your 12 ships against my 47? Thane laughed. "I have destroyed civilizations with fleets 10 times larger than yours. Those civilizations," Morrison replied coldly, "were not human." Morrison signaled to Lisa to cut the transmission. The screen returned to showing the tactical display, where the two fleets were now only seconds away from weapons range. "Captain Rodriguez," Morrison called to the Vengeance. "Fire." The destroyer UNS Vengeance unleashed its main railgun. The weapon fired a solid tungsten projectile at 12% the speed of light. The projectile was invisible to the naked eye, but Morrison could track it on his instruments as it crossed the space between the two fleets in less than a second. The Korthak cruiser that Rodriguez had targeted never knew what hit it. The railgun projectile punched straight through the ship's energy shields as if they did not exist. The tungsten slug tore through the alien vessel from bow to stern, destroying everything in its path before exiting out the back of the ship. The Korthak cruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light and debris. The aliens had never encountered kinetic weapons before, and their energy-based defenses were completely useless against solid projectiles. "Direct hit!" Torres shouted from his station. "Enemy cruiser destroyed." Morrison allowed himself a small smile. "All ships open fire. Show them what human weapons can do." The entire human fleet opened fire at once. Railguns, torpedo launchers, and missile batteries sent a storm of solid projectiles toward the Korthak formation. The aliens tried to dodge, their ships moving with elegant grace, but they were not prepared for the sheer volume of fire coming their way. 3 more Korthak ships exploded in the first volley. Their energy shields, designed to absorb plasma beams and energy weapons, provided no protection against chunks of metal traveling at incredible speeds. "Enemy fleet is breaking formation," Torres reported. "They're trying to scatter." "War Admiral," Thane's voice came over the communication system, no longer amused. "All ships, evasive maneuvers, their weapons penetrate our shields, adapt firing patterns." The Korthak fleet began to move in unpredictable patterns, trying to avoid the human projectiles. Their ships were faster and more maneuverable than the human vessels, but Morrison had expected this. "Captain Hayes," Morrison called to the heavy cruiser UNS Reckoning. "Yes, sir," Commander Lisa Hayes replied. She was one of Morrison's most experienced officers, known for her ability to coordinate complex attacks. "Begin torpedo spread pattern 7. I want a wall of explosives between us and them." "Aye, sir. Launching torpedoes now." The UNS Reckoning fired a spread of 50 torpedoes in a wide pattern. The weapons were not aimed at specific targets, but instead created a field of explosions that the Korthak ships would have to fly through to reach the human fleet. The Korthak tried to weave between the explosions, but several ships were caught in the blasts. Unlike human torpedoes, which used chemical explosives, these weapons detonated with nuclear force. 2 Korthak destroyers vanished in balls of atomic fire. "Sir," Torres called out, "the Korthak are returning fire." Bright beams of superheated plasma lanced out from the alien ships toward the human fleet. The energy weapons moved at the speed of light, much faster than human projectiles, and several beams struck the UNS Retribution's hull. Morrison felt the ship shake under the impact, but the vibration was not as severe as he had expected. Damage. Report. Chief Engineer Ryan Carter's voice came over the communication system from the engine room. Minor hull damage to sections 7 and 12. Our armor absorbed most of the impact. These energy weapons don't pack the punch I expected. Morrison nodded. Human ships were built to survive in the dangerous environment of space around Earth, where radiation, asteroids, and solar flares were constant threats. Their heavy armor was designed to protect against kinetic impacts, which made them naturally resistant to energy weapons. Captain Blake, Morrison called to his fighter squadron commander aboard the carrier UNS Defiance. Ready and waiting, sir, Captain Tony Blake replied. Blake was a former fighter pilot himself, known for his aggressive tactics and ability to think quickly in combat. Launch all fighters. I want them to exploit the gaps in their formation. Roger that, sir. All squadrons launching now. 60 human fighters poured out of the UNS Defiance's launch bays. The small, fast ships immediately spread out and began attacking the Korthak fleet from multiple angles. Their smaller size made them harder to hit with the aliens' large plasma cannons. The Korthak tried to adapt their tactics, but they were clearly struggling with the human approach to warfare. Their elegant, coordinated attacks were being disrupted by the chaotic nature of human combat. Sir, Chief Tactical Officer Megan Scott called from her station. I'm detecting a pattern in their energy signatures. I think I've found a weakness. Morrison turned to Scott, a brilliant engineer who specialized in analyzing enemy technology during battle. What did you find? Their power cores are poorly shielded against electromagnetic interference, Scott explained quickly. If we can hit them, with the right frequency pulse, we might be able to cause overloads. Morrison felt his pulse quicken. A weakness in the enemy's power systems could turn the entire battle in humanity's favor. Can you modify our torpedoes to generate the right frequency? Morrison asked. Already working on it, sir, Scott replied, her hands flying over her console. I need 2 minutes. Morrison looked back at the tactical display. The battle was turning into a running fight with both fleets maneuvering for advantage. The humans had destroyed 8 Korthak ships, but the aliens were beginning to adapt to human tactics. 2 minutes, Morrison announced to his fleet. Hold your positions and keep firing. Chief Scott is about to give us the key to victory. The space around Sanctuary Haven filled with the light of explosions and energy beams as two very different philosophies of warfare clashed among the stars. The Korthak fought with precision and elegance while the humans brought chaos and overwhelming firepower. War Admiral Thane was about to learn why humanity had never lost a war. 3 weeks had passed since the first battle at Sanctuary Haven. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Retribution, watching repair crews work on the hull damage from their latest fight with the Korthak. His fleet had won the first engagement, destroying half of War Admiral Thane's ships before the alien commander retreated. But Morrison knew the victory had been too easy. Admiral, Communications Officer Lisa Barnes called from her station. I'm detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Morrison turned to look at the main screen as it showed the sensor readings. What he saw made his blood run cold. Over 200 Korthak warships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel, arranged in a formation that stretched across the entire outer system. Mother of God, Captain Walsh whispered, standing beside Morrison. That's 10 times the size of the First Fleet. Lieutenant Commander Torres was already analyzing the new arrivals from his intelligence station. Admiral, the lead ship is twice the size of anything we've seen before. I'm reading massive energy signatures from their weapon systems. Morrison studied the tactical display with growing concern. His own fleet now consisted of only 7 operational ships after the losses from the first battle. Even with their superior weapons technology, facing 200 enemy ships was beyond impossible. Sir, Torres continued, I'm intercepting their communications. The fleet is commanded by Supreme Admiral Vex Moranis. According to Korthak military records we captured, he's their most experienced commander. Morrison had heard that name before in intelligence briefings. Moranis was responsible for the destruction of over 30 civilizations. Unlike Thane, who was young and arrogant, Moranis was old, careful, and had never lost a battle. Lisa, can you establish contact with the Zilani on the surface? Morrison asked. Yes, sir. Prime Minister Thylin is waiting. The main screen changed to show the underground bunker where the Zilani leadership had taken shelter. Thylin Voss appeared, looking even more exhausted than before. Beside him stood Zenna Clare, the military coordinator, her blue skin pale with worry. Admiral Morrison, Thylin said, his musical voice filled with sadness. We have detected the new Korthak fleet. You must leave immediately. Your 7 ships cannot defeat 200. Morrison felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The logical choice was to retreat and save his remaining crews, but the image of 3 million innocent Zilani waiting to die made that option impossible to consider. We're not leaving, Morrison said firmly. Zenna stepped forward on the screen. Admiral, this is not your fight anymore. You have already done more than we could have hoped. Please, save yourselves. Before Morrison could respond, Torres called out urgently from his station. Sir, I'm intercepting detailed Korthak communications. You need to hear this. Morrison turned away from the screen showing the Zilani leaders. What did you find? Torres played the translated alien conversation through the bridge speakers. The voice belonged to Supreme Admiral Moranis speaking to his fleet commanders. The genetic extraction project is behind schedule, Moranis was saying. We need at least 50,000 more test subjects before we can complete the modifications to our own species. The Zilani specimens have provided useful data, but we require fresh samples from other peaceful races. Morrison felt his anger growing as he listened to the alien commander discussing sentient beings like laboratory animals. The dying homeworld gives us perhaps 6 months before the atmospheric collapse becomes irreversible, Moranis continued. If we cannot complete the genetic modifications by then, our entire civilization will perish. Failure is not acceptable. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Morrison turned back to the screen showing Thylin and Zenna. Did you hear that? Morrison asked. Thylin's large dark eyes were wide with horror. They are using our people for experiments, but we heard rumors. Some of our captured civilians were taken to their research ships instead of being killed immediately. Dr. Amy Foster's voice came through the bridge communication system from the medical bay. Admiral, I've been analyzing the captured Korthak data from our first battle. What they're doing is genetic engineering on a massive scale. Explain, Morrison ordered. The Korthak homeworld is dying, Dr. Foster continued. Their atmosphere is becoming toxic due to industrial pollution. They can't fix the damage, so they're trying to modify their own biology to survive. They're taking genetic material from peaceful species like the Zilani and trying to incorporate it into their own DNA. Morrison began to understand the horrible truth. They're trying to remove their own aggressive nature? Exactly, Dr. Foster replied. They believe that if they can become less violent while keeping their intelligence, they can rebuild their civilization. But the process requires living test subjects from dozens of species. Captain Walsh moved closer to Morrison. Admiral, that means they'll never stop. They can't afford to stop. If they don't complete their research, their entire species goes extinct. Morrison felt the full weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. This was no longer just a battle to save the Zilani. The Korthak would continue destroying civilizations across the galaxy until they found a way to save themselves, or until someone stopped them permanently. Torres, Morrison called to his intelligence officer. Is there any way to disrupt their research? Torres worked at his console for several minutes before looking up with a grim expression. Their main research facility is aboard Supreme Admiral Moranis's flagship. All of their genetic data and experimental results are stored in a single central computer core. If that data were destroyed, Morrison asked. Their entire project would collapse, Torres replied. Decades of research, gone. Without it, they'd have no choice but to focus on trying to save their homeworld through other means. Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew. They were good people, brave and skilled, but what he was considering would be asking them to die for strangers on the other side of the galaxy. Captain Walsh seemed to read Morrison's thoughts. "Admiral, if we're going to do this, we need a plan that gives us at least some chance of success." Morrison nodded and moved to the tactical display. The Korthak fleet was arranged in layers around their flagship, with the research vessel protected at the center of the formation. "We can't fight through 200 ships," Morrison said, thinking out loud. "But we might be able to reach the flagship if we use the right approach." Commander Kate Phillips appeared on the screen from her ship. The fast cruiser UNS Stalker. She was Morrison's most experienced special operations officer, known for her ability to complete impossible missions. "Admiral," Phillips said, "I've been listening to the tactical discussions. If you need someone to lead a strike team to that flagship, I volunteer." Morrison studied Phillips through the screen. She was young, maybe 30, with short red hair and intense green eyes. She had never failed a mission, but she had also never faced odds like these. "Kate, this would be a one-way trip," Morrison said honestly. "The chances of getting back alive are essentially zero." Phillips nodded without hesitation. "Sir, 3 million innocent people are going to die if we don't stop this research. That's worth the risk." Torres looked up from his station. "Admiral, if Commander Phillips can reach the central computer core and destroy it, the psychological impact on the Korthak fleet might be enormous. Losing decades of research could cause them to panic." Morrison made his decision. "Kate, you'll take the UNS Stalker and 2 escort ships. Your mission is to penetrate the enemy formation and destroy that research data. The rest of the fleet will create a distraction to draw their attention." "Understood, sir," Phillips replied. "When do we go?" Morrison looked at the tactical display showing the massive Korthak fleet moving toward Sanctuary Haven. In a few hours, they would be in position to begin their final assault on the planet. "We attack in 2 hours," Morrison announced. "All ships, prepare for combat operations." As his crew began preparing for what might be their final battle, Morrison looked once more at the screen showing Thylin and Zena. The Zalani leaders were watching him with expressions of hope mixed with fear. "Admiral Morrison," Thylin said, quietly, "why are you willing to die for people you have never met?" Morrison thought about the question for a moment before answering. "Because that's what humans do, Thylin. We protect those who cannot protect themselves, even if it costs us everything." The screen went dark as Morrison ended the transmission. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing weapons and systems for the battle ahead. They all knew the odds, but none of them suggested retreat. Supreme Admiral Moranis was about to discover that humanity would rather die fighting than allow innocent people to suffer. The final battle for Sanctuary Haven was about to begin. Commander Kate Phillips gripped the controls of the UNS Stalker as her small strike force raced toward the massive Korthak flagship at the center of the enemy formation. Behind her, the main human fleet was engaging 200 alien warships in a desperate battle that lit up the darkness of space with explosions and energy beams. "Kate, you're almost through their outer defenses." Admiral Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system. 2 more kilometers to the flagship." Phillips could see the research vessel ahead of her. It was enormous, 3 times the size of any ship she had ever seen, with strange organic curves that made it look more like a living creature than a machine. Weapons fire from dozens of Korthak ships streaked past her hull as she pushed the Stalker to maximum speed. "Torres, I'm reading massive data storage systems throughout that ship," Phillips called to Lieutenant Commander Sam Torres, who was aboard one of her escort vessels. "The central computer core should be in the middle section." "Copy that," Torres replied. "I'm picking up heavy resistance between you and the target. Looks like they know what we're trying to do." Phillips watched her tactical display as Korthak fighters swarmed toward her small force. The alien pilots were skilled, but they had never faced human desperation before. She rolled her ship to avoid a plasma beam and returned fire with her railgun, destroying 2 enemy fighters in a single shot. The UNS Stalker punched through the Korthak defensive line and slammed into the flagship's docking bay. Phillips felt the impact through her entire body as her ship tore through the alien hull plating. Emergency lights flickered on throughout her bridge as atmosphere began venting from the damaged sections. "All teams, move out," Phillips ordered. over the ship's communication system. We have maybe 10 minutes before this ship's defenses overwhelm us. Phillips and her boarding team fought their way through the corridors of the Korthak research vessel. The interior was filled with strange equipment and holding cells that made Phillips sick to her stomach. In some of the cells, she could see Zilani prisoners being held for the genetic experiments. "Free them," Phillips ordered her team. "Every prisoner we can find." The Korthak warriors inside the ship fought with desperate fury, knowing that their entire civilization depended on protecting the research data. But human soldiers had been training for close-quarters combat since childhood, and the confined spaces of the ship corridors gave them the advantage they needed. Chief Tactical Officer Megan Scott worked frantically at a computer terminal, trying to access the central data core. "I'm in," she shouted over the sound of weapons fire. "But there are multiple security systems protecting the research files." "How long do you need?" Phillips asked, firing her rifle at a group of Korthak soldiers who were trying to reach their position. "At least 5 minutes," Scott replied, her fingers flying over the alien control interface. Phillips looked at her remaining team members. They were down to 8 people, and more Korthak reinforcements were arriving every minute. "Hold this position at all costs," she ordered. Meanwhile, in the space around the flagship, the main battle was reaching its climax. Admiral Morrison watched from the bridge of the UNS Retribution as his remaining ships fought against impossible odds. The human fleet was down to 4 operational vessels, but they had managed to destroy over 60 Korthak ships through superior tactics and weapons technology. "Admiral?" Communications Officer Lisa Barnes called out. "I'm receiving a transmission from Supreme Admiral Moranis." "Put him on screen," Morrison ordered. The alien commander appeared on the main viewing screen. Moranis was older than Thane, had been, with scars across his scaled face and eyes that held the weariness of countless battles. But now those eyes also showed something Morrison had never seen in a Korthak before. Fear. "Admiral Morrison," Moranis said, his voice strained. "Your people have penetrated our research vessel. Call them back immediately, and we will withdraw from this system." Morrison smiled grimly. "Supreme Admiral, I don't think you understand the situation. My people don't retreat." "You fool!" Moranis shouted, his composure finally breaking. "That research represents the only hope for my species. Survival, without it, we are all dead." "Then you should have thought of that before you started murdering innocent civilizations," Morrison replied coldly. Inside the research vessel, Chief Scott finally broke through the last security barrier. "I've got it," she announced. "All research data is accessible. But Admiral, you need to see this." Phillips moved to look at Scott's screen, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The Korthak research was more extensive than anyone had realized. They had been conducting experiments on dozens of species across the galaxy, and their genetic modification program was almost complete. "They're not just trying to save their homeworld," Phillips said into her communicator. "They're trying to create a new version of themselves that can conquer the entire galaxy." Morrison's voice came back immediately. "Destroy it all. Every file, every piece of data." "Already working on it," Scott replied. But as she began the deletion process, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. "Admiral, they're initiating some kind of self-destruct sequence. This whole ship is going to explode in less than 2 minutes." Phillips looked around at her team. They had accomplished their mission, but there was no way to reach their ships in time to escape. The Korthak had decided that if they couldn't save their research, they would at least take the humans with them. "Kate?" Morrison's voice came through the communicator, filled with emotion. "Can you reach the escape pods?" Phillips checked her tactical display. The nearest escape pods were on the other side of the ship, through corridors now filled with Korthak soldiers and spreading fires from the battle damage. "Negative, sir," Phillips replied calmly. "But the mission is complete. All research data has been destroyed." In space around the flagship, Captain Dan Rodriguez aboard the destroyer, UNS Vengeance, saw what was happening. Without hesitation, he turned his ship toward the massive research vessel and activated his own ship's emergency systems. "Admiral," Rodriguez called over the fleet communication system, I'm going to ram the flagship. If I can trigger their self-destruct. Early, maybe Phillips and her team can reach safety. Dan, no, Morrison ordered. There has to be another way. Sir, with respect, there isn't time, Rodriguez replied. Tell my family I died protecting innocent people. That's all any soldier can ask for. The UNS Vengeance accelerated toward the Korthak flagship at full speed. Rodriguez's ship struck the research vessel just as its self-destruct sequence reached critical levels. The combined explosion lit up the entire system like a new star. When the light faded, both ships were gone. But the explosion had done more than destroy the research data. It had shattered the morale of the entire Korthak fleet. Supreme Admiral Moranis stared at the empty space where his flagship had been, knowing that decades of work and his species' only hope had been destroyed by human determination. All ships, Moranis broadcast to his remaining fleet, retreat to home territory immediately. Admiral Morrison watched as over 100 surviving Korthak ships fled the system. The aliens moved without formation or coordination, their elegant tactics replaced by panic and despair. Sir, Torres called from his station. I'm receiving transmissions from the planet's surface. The Zilani are celebrating. Morrison nodded but felt no joy in their victory. The cost had been too high. Of his original 12 ships, only 3 remained operational. Good people like Kate Phillips and Dan Rodriguez had died to save strangers on the other side of the galaxy. Lisa, establish contact with Prime Minister Thailand, Morrison ordered. The main screen showed the Zilani leader, who was now crying tears of joy and relief. Behind him, Morrison could see other Zilani celebrating their survival. Admiral Morrison, Thailand said, his musical voice trembling with emotion. You saved us. You actually saved us. How can we ever repay this debt? Morrison thought about all the humans who had died in the battle. Thailand, we didn't do this for payment. We did it because it was right. But there must be something, Thailand insisted. We have medical technology, agricultural advances, scientific knowledge. Anything we have is yours. Morrison realized that despite the terrible cost, something good could come from this tragedy. An alliance between humanity and the Zilani could benefit both species and help prevent future atrocities. There is one thing, Morrison said. Help us build a better galaxy, one where peaceful species don't have to fear extinction from predators like the Korthak. Over the following weeks, as the human fleet repaired their ships and prepared for the journey home, other alien species began sending messages to Admiral Morrison. Word of humanity's sacrifice at Sanctuary Haven had spread across the galaxy, and dozens of civilizations were requesting human protection from various threats. Morrison sat in his quarters aboard the UNS Retribution, reading through the requests for help. Pirates attacking trade routes, aggressive species threatening peaceful worlds, entire civilizations crying out for someone strong enough to protect them. Captain Walsh entered his quarters carrying a datapad with even more requests. Admiral, we're getting calls for help from every corner of the galaxy. Everyone wants the protection of the Ruthless Deathworlders who saved the Zilani. Morrison looked out the window at the stars and Tho.